Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, today we're doing something a little crazy. We're diving into a massive, mind-bending what-if thought experiment. We're going to look at one of television's absolute most iconic shows, a true cultural juggernaut that literally defined a generation of viewers, and we are going to completely shatter its timeline. Think about the stories you know by heart, those characters you practically grew up with, and the endings that feel so permanently etched into our pop culture memory. Well, what happens when we pull the rug right out from under television history? Let's get right into it.
So picture this. What if everything you remember about this group of 6 friends ended earlier than it actually did? I want to hook you right off the bat here by just totally ripping away the cultural memories you know. We are plunging directly into a world without seasons 6 through 10, just a sudden, jarring stop right after season 5. We're talking about a world where every friendship, every romance, and every bit of unresolved tension is left permanently hanging in midair. And strangely enough, ending the show here wouldn't just change the plot, it would completely reshape how we understand these characters forever.
Think about the erased legacy in this alternate reality. There are no final emotional breakthroughs sitting around Central Perk. There's no long-awaited I got off the plane moment, no grand wedding arc stretched into a beautiful, satisfying resolution. Poof, gone. We lose all of these massive cultural touchstones. Instead, we just get this abrupt halt. No payoffs for years of emotional setup, the narrative simply cuts to black, and the characters are frozen in time exactly as they were.
Now, to really understand what's at stake here, you have to remember where Season 5 actually sits in their journey. It's this incredibly fragile tipping point between early adulthood and true maturity. The group isn't just 6 friends sharing an apartment and coffee shop tables anymore. They've started evolving into adults making irreversible life choices. Right? Rachel's building a career, and the others are navigating real, heavy responsibilities, but they haven't fully arrived yet. By stopping the clock right here, the biggest question for the audience suddenly shifts. It's no longer, what happens next? It becomes, wait, what was all of this leading to?
Let's look at Section 1, the unfinished romances.
Let's see how this plays out with Monica and Chandler. In our reality, they are this celebrated rock-solid couple whose romance blossoms, survive the secrecy phase, and really becomes one of the sturdiest foundations of the later seasons. But if Season 5 is the end, they remain totally suspended in fragility and uncertainty. Their relationship was still a secret, it was still brand new. They instantly become a what-could-have-been story. We never get the comfort of seeing them fully step into commitment without fear.
And that lack of closure forces us to ask a really heavy question. Was this relationship just an escape from loneliness for them, or was it something real that just never had time to mature? Imagine trying to interpret Monica and Chandler without the comfort of seeing their later years together. Their entire dynamic becomes a massive question mark. Instead of being the absolute gold standard for healthy TV relationships, they become this haunting symbol of beautiful, interrupted potential.
Then, of course, there's Ross and Rachel. Even just 5 seasons in, their dynamic is already defined by this intense emotional gravity. They have a history of love, breakups, and absolute emotional chaos orbiting each other constantly. They're pulled together and pushed apart by timing, pride, and unresolved feelings. If we end at Season 5, their story never reaches those later milestones that define them in our pop culture memory. There's no definitive reconciliation, no long-term attempt at building something stable.
The tragedy of that timeline is perfectly captured in just a few words: almost together, almost healed, almost ready. Ending right here wouldn't erase their iconic love story, it would preserve it in its absolute most unstable form. Forever unfinished, forever unresolved, locked in a cycle of almosts. The audience would be left filling in the emotional blanks themselves. And honestly, from a storytelling perspective, that is incredibly powerful. But as a viewer, it is deeply, deeply frustrating.
Moving on to Section 2. Hope without payoff.
Think about Joey for a second. By Season 5, he is still caught right between being a struggling actor and a rising talent. He hasn't yet reached the level of recognition or the deeper emotional maturity that the later seasons eventually give him. If the story ends here, he doesn't become that unexpectedly grounded, fiercely loyal friend we later come to appreciate. Instead, Joey is just stuck in ambition without resolution. We never see if his dream actually leads anywhere meaningful. He becomes a snapshot of hope with zero payoff.
And Phoebe's story? Wow, hers might actually feel the most bittersweet of all. By Season 5, she's lived through a life defined by loss, fierce independence, and total unconventional survival. The reality we know gives her grounding, a marriage, and emotional stability. But if the show stops, she remains the most symbolically free character for sure, but also the most emotionally unfinished. She has wisdom without closure, strength without final grounding, A character who beautifully taught everyone else how to live differently, but literally never got her own final chapter of settling down.
Which brings us to Section 3, the death of evolution.
Zooming out from the specific characters, we hit the most profound loss of the whole shebang, because the biggest casualty of a Season 5 ending isn't any single person. It's the show's core overarching theme of evolution. The show, as we know it, is about growing up in real time, watching people change slowly and, yeah, sometimes painfully over years. Think about Central Perk. In reality, it represents comfort across all life stages. But in the alternate ending, it collapses into a frozen memory of early adulthood. Consider The Apartments. In reality, those doors open to new phases of life. In the alternate timeline, they simply represent potential interrupted. The humor is still there, but the transformation completely disappears. It changes absolutely everything about how we emotionally attach to this world.
And finally, Section 4, ambiguity versus closure.
So how do we, as an audience, process unfinished stories compared to satisfying conclusions? A Season 5 ending shifts the burden of narrative closure entirely onto your imagination. It becomes the viewer's burden. Do Ross and Rachel truly find peace? Do Monica and Chandler survive outside their little secret bubble? Does Joey ever get his big breakthrough? Does Phoebe fully find a home in the world she always felt apart from? You have to carry the story forward yourself. You are the one who has to answer the emotional questions that the writers planted but never got to finish.
And that gives us the ultimate legacy comparison. A finished narrative rewards your patience, letting characters fail, recover, and evolve, answering emotional questions planted years earlier. But the alternate reality? It leaves us with a shared memory that never fully resolves. It reminds us that what we remember from stories isn't only what they gave us, but also what they almost gave us. Sometimes, actually, not having closure creates an entirely different, incredibly powerful kind of legacy.
The version we actually got chose completion over ambiguity. It chose emotional closure over permanent uncertainty. And honestly, that's why the journey continues to matter all these years later. But it leaves us with one final, provocative question to ponder today. Do you prefer the haunting power of an unfinished legacy or the rewarding patience of the closure we actually got? Think about that the next time you revisit your favorite story. Thank you so much for joining me on this alternate reality journey here on The Explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.